Okay, welcome back to Hindustan Astrology. I'm Katya, and in our new episode of Interviews with the Gurus, we have a very esteemed scholar with us, Edith Hathaway. She is somebody that I met through my teacher, Joni Patry, and I just absolutely fell in love with her research, and I love the way she presents things. She's very much an academic scholar. And I'm so excited to share with you her research today because she's done a lot of extensive work on the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions over time, over thousands of years. And what she's discovered are patterns that especially go with, of course, the elements and the signs, but she's really looked at current events, historical events, and lined them up with these conjunctions so that they make sense to us. Because, astrology is supposed to help us, to see the patterns in nature. And I'm so excited to share with you today her research. So thank you so much, Edith, for joining me.
Thank you. Good to be with you, Katya.
Thank you so much. Now, from what I understand, you started with Western astrology and did that for 12 years, a Jupiter cycle. And then you got into Vedic astrology. And since then, you've been practicing for 40 years. And it's so amazing to me, that just the breadth of your work. So what was it that first got you into astrology, and then how did you, make the switch to Vedic?
Well, it's hard to say. Actually, we had this discussion in a certain way through music. I was involved in music and composing, performing, and so forth, and extremely interested in the sounds that were coming through me. And then my transition into metaphysics, which included astrology, revolved around becoming more interested in why the sound was coming through me rather than what the sound was. So that was although I'm still extremely imbued with sound and I love music of all kinds, and we could go into that, but today's discussion is about other things. No, I think music and sound is so much what's in the mind and the brain and everything. So as they say in so many sacred scriptures, it all begins with the sound, with the Om, with whatever sacred word. So in a sense, it began with the sound. Now, so the first thing that I knew about was Western tropical astrology. I was living in New York City at the time, in Manhattan, and that was what was around me. So I went in that direction, as many of us do, because that's the more prominent astrology in the West. And then in 1988, I was practicing, and I was using Uranian astrology, which is
from Russia, right?
Yes, and no, German.
German. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a German school.
Oh.
And so I was doing that and astrocartography and all these things. So a client came to me. This really is where it began. And she said to me, well, this Vedic astrologer said to me that this and this and this was going to happen on a certain day. And it turned out to be an accident on a horse. Now, I don't know whether she was warned about it. Now it's all these years ago. So I don't know if she was warned about an accident in advance or all of that. But in any case, she was just stunned that this astrologer got it absolutely correct and down to the day. And I can't remember either whether she'd been to me before, probably, because she was determined that I find this all using my methods. Now, why she decided that I should do this, Anyway, so I rolled up my sleeves. I thought, well, of course, I've got excellent methods. I'll find this. And I couldn't find it. So I said, well, who was that astrologer? It was Chakapani Lal. Wouldn't you know? The person who became later on, not immediately, but pretty soon, because I booked an appointment myself. And so that's where it began. Because I thought, well, if there's something that's more precise out there, I thought I had the precision tools That was all I needed. I thought I had, very incredible, and they are incredible tools. But I was also won over by the whole largesse of the system, the ancient system, the unbroken, the oral tradition, all of that.
Well, and that's, your story is very similar to Joni's switching over, and also to mine. I started with Western, and it was the same thing. It stopped working because if you're using tropical zodiac, it's not where the planets really are. It's not going to be as accurate. And
well, I can't say I stopped immediately. There was a transition period.
Yeah, there's a transition.
Ironically, I was at the time writing a book on Western astrology. It was my first book, just navigating by the stars.
Western. It's just what I found is it's incomplete. It's about 10% of Vedic. And studying with Ihsan Kazini from Iran, I've learned that what we know as Western astrology actually came from ancient Persia. And they were taking, royal court mathematicians are sharing information. The north of India is not that far from Iran, right? These guys are sharing information. So these royal court astrologers of Persia were taking what the Vedic, and Babylonian as well, astronomers and astrologers were using, and they were aligning it with the sun. Why were they aligning it with the sun? Because they were Zoroastrians.
All right.
And they were sun worshipers. So of course they're going to use the solar chart. It's not that it's invalid, it's just one bit of it. But if you rely completely upon the solar chart, you're going to miss a lot. And so that's, for me, what made the transition. And also, I wanted to find out more about my past lives, and everybody in Western said, you've got to study Vedic because the nodes, the K2 will tell you all about your past life. So that was, for me, I was a beeline, Well,
I don't know if I know all about the past lives from that, but I do know that you can see the trends using especially the Navamsha chart. You can see where you're going, and you definitely with the lifetime dasha systems, the Vimshotri in particular. Of course, we got 55 dasha systems who can use all of those, but it does give an amazing picture of destiny, and it does, I would say, it does give that amazing perspective on previous lives, because that certain people, they couldn't have come into certain situations, particularly the extreme situations. It could not have happened without some prior setup in another lifetime. And so, that definitely fits into it as well.
I couldn't find that information in the Western chart. So I was like, well, I want to know more. I want to fall down the rabbit hole, and so.
Right.
And that's, I find, most Vedic astrologers know Western, but most Western astrologers don't know Vedic.
True. Although there's some, I know, I spoke with Bruce Schofield, and I think, if I remember correctly, he was really impressed with the dashas. So some of them do like to check out.
Oh, that's what completely sold me over. When Kapil Raj read my dashas, he said, I'm going to show you how accurate this is. And he just explained my whole life. And I said, okay, that's it. I'm wrong, you're right. I want to learn, teach me.
Yeah, it's staggering. It's quite staggering. Yeah,
it really is. Yeah. So anyway, so you've been, doing this extensive research, and of course your book, In Search of Destiny, which Jyoti calls the War and Peace of Vedic Astrology, because it is very extensive. But I mean, my goodness, it's just, it reads very easy. It really does. It reads, it's not so above people's understanding that they can't get into it. So I love the stories.
Oh, thank you. That's, thank goodness, because you want to be, I do a lot of deep research, but at the same time, I regard writing and editing as they're one and the same. You can't write without editing.
Oh yeah.
And I do have some editors checking it out. But writing and researching is a major part of my life, in addition to clients and teaching and lecturing. Yes. So thanks for that. Thanks for that. And volume 2 is coming. It is coming. It'll be a while yet, but it's coming.
We're hoping some videos as well. I keep telling her she's so photogenic and so easy to talk to. Really, it's So I hope that that's a part of it too. So
Okay.
let's talk about, you know, the topic of today's discussion, which is this year's Saturn-Jupiter conjunction.
Mhm.
And it's taking place in an earth sign, but last year it was in a fire sign, Sagittarius, but now they're moving into, you know, December 20th is the major conjunction in Capricorn.
Right, not last
so
year,
why
but
don't you go
2020.
ahead?
Yeah, I'll just correct you on that point because it was not last year, but 20 years ago. So you were saying last year, I think you meant.
Well, but last year they both came into Sagittarius. They weren't
Oh,
exactly
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I mean, the degree was farther apart,
Right.
but
So
they both
you're
came
right there.
together, and now they're doing this and going backwards.
Correct. Yeah. And Jupiter's moving in and out of, yeah, I thought you were talking about the conjunctions.
And then also, we're also going to talk extensively about Graha Yuddha and what she learned from Chakrapani about how it really plays out. So
yeah, with the conjunctions, etc. Now, I wonder if this would be a good time to maybe show that Earth period, the core Earth period.
Okay, so let's do a screen share. And I've got water. Let's see.
Yeah, it's the top one. It's the top one.
Okay, so you want to show Earth first?
Earth, yeah.
Okay, I think this is it. Oh, those are the larger cycles.
Yeah, that's the larger cycle.
Okay.
I think we just go to the one with the kind of V formation.
Okay.
For 2020. Yeah, I mean, these are all very interesting, but we may never get to discussing what we're in the thick of now.
Okay, so there's Earth.
Right, that's a good one. But then there's the one with the kind of V formation with the 20. It's the one just, that's it. There you are. There you are. So those others are useful. So you got them right handy there. So the reason I've been featuring this graph, which I came up with in my webmaster, made it look quite beautiful, if I do say so myself. So you see how the 2020 is the pinpoint. It's the middle of this 120 years. Now, just because we don't have, 3 or 4 hours here, I could show you the larger, several thousand years where basically these Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions are going to mutate. They're going to go and be featured in one particular element, either earth, air, fire, or water. And they're going to last there for several hundred years on average. And then they'll move on to another. So this gives a kind of thrust for the period. Now, we actually started the Earth period in 1921, September 9th of 1921. But then it went into a mutation. There was a mutation when, and again, I had to kind of assign this. It's not like, it's like when the conjunctions are not going any more than 2 sequentially. Then you have, before it goes solid into one element, it's going to kind of mutate back and forth from the previous period. Okay, so the previous period was fire. So we've got a lot we could say about the mutation period, but it's back and forth from fire to earth. So then all of the things we want to know about the earth period, they're going to be very strong in the core period. So we see this from 1961 on, and we see that and I have also defined, so there's a lot to see in this chart in a certain way. Astrologers will be quite familiar with the fact that the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions are occurring every 20 years. So we see that and also, this is interesting because Western astrologers don't make anything of this, but when the conjunctions occur 3 times, what I call a triple conjunction, that is a major big deal. And in the 20th century, we had 2 of those. 1940-41 in Aries, 1980-81 in Virgo.
Wow.
So what I call the atomic age, which we could all agree with that started with the invention of the atom bomb in World War II there. Mm-hmm. And when you examine the speed with which that bomb was invented, I mean, it was just extraordinary what was all done in a very short amount of time, which reminds you of fire and reminds you of Aries. And fire, of course, is weapons, amongst other things, power of the military. So we come up, as I say, I'm going to have to skim over some of these details, but you move into the Earth period, and the core elements because, or core issues of the battle, you might say, the planetary war between Jupiter and Saturn, this might be the time in part to introduce that, come into play. Because in Graha Yuddha, which is the Sanskrit for planetary war, there's no, let's put it this way, there's conflicting information in the Vedic classics. And when I was using it and got quite interested in it back in the early 90s, I found that some of the classic rules, like, well, the planet at the lower longitude always wins. Well, I worked with that and it just didn't work for me. It didn't make any sense. So Chakrapani, who'd by then become a friend and a colleague and a mentor really, because we talked frequently and at different periods, almost really daily. So I would ask him my questions, which is, it's a pretty great privilege. You're asking a top-rate Vedic astrologer from India, how do I make sense of this? It's great to be able to ask someone, particularly in an oral tradition. So he said, well, I said, this planet at the lower longitude, that doesn't work for me. And he said, well, I don't use that. I said, what do you use? So he said, well, I use a system where, and he explained to me, that there is an order of 3. And he got this from his father, who got it from his father, so his grandfather's father. Parampara, it's called Parampara.
So in Graha Yuddha Planetary War, these are Chakrapani's rules that he learned as an oral tradition. And as a folklorist, I mean, to me, this is another reason why I love this, is because the oral tradition. I mean, you can't, you have to study with someone from India. You're not going to get it from a book.
No. And it was one of the most important things he taught me. And I said, well, okay, so I'll give you these principles, and they're all written up at length. I've given talks on these. My first article was in 2003. I then revised and expanded it in 2010. So you can find that article at my website. Gives the principles and then gives examples of every single combination you can come into, which is about 25 charts.
Wow.
Anyway, the principles are these. Number 1, the largest planet in size. Number 2, the planet with the greatest effulgence or brightness. Number 3, the fastest planet. Okay, and only 5 planets can be in Graha Yuddha. That's Venus, Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. There's the only 5. That's also true in any classical Vedic text. So that agrees. Where it departs from the classic, but not, as Chakrapani was quick to say, not incompatible with classic principles, right? And we go through all the astronomical, so I won't go into all of that here, but we go into all the different possibilities of how this works and why this works. And you might think, well, Jupiter should win over Saturn since it's got greater mass, but no. According to Chakrapani, Saturn always wins over Jupiter because it is not only more important as the planet of karma, but it has, with its large ring system, it is much bigger. So bigger and more important. And when you examine the ring system of Saturn, it's pretty amazing. And as I was writing about it, even I think in 2009, because the final version of that article came out in 2010, they had some infrared system and they've spotted yet another ring at another angle that was oblique to the other rings. So it just kept proving the point that this is a very large and complex ring system, which makes Saturn the largest planet in that sense. Then Jupiter, obviously, is the next one. So then brightness, well, Jupiter, then after Jupiter would be Venus. And then, I won't go into the other details about Mercury and Mars and how that ends up, but you can read the article. Since we're going to be discussing Mars, Saturn, and the United Nations chart, I will mention, some people can't quite agree with it or grok it, but I have seen it work time after time, and that is that Mars always loses the planetary war.
Wow.
And so ironic, right? Because
and what Mars, a blessing. I think it's a blessing in disguise.
Well, and I examine that. This comes up in about 5 or 6 people in my In Search of Destiny 2012 book. So some of the studies that I had done initially in a paragraph or two expanded into larger studies. One of them is Adolf Hitler. There are other people as well, where it's so clear how this works. And when they go into a period where, say they're in the dasha of the losing planet, pretty tough. Oh, Woody Allen's another one. Very dramatic, how he enters the period of the losing planet. You know, a lot of dramatic events occurred, which many people know about. So that's in the book. But back to Jupiter, Saturn. Saturn rules over business and security, material security, and being able to manifest things. So you take, you know, there are all these weapons that were coming through in fire periods, but they couldn't possibly do them in the scope that they did with the atom bomb if it weren't organized to the extent that Saturn could organize. So you had partnerships across countries and of course corporations and the best scientists working as quickly as possible to, you know, what they thought was saving the world from Hitler, who was believed to be building his own bomb. And in fact, I don't know if they were as far along. They may have been. That's another story, that they may have been as far along, but they did not. The scientists did not want to share that. They did not want to give it to Hitler. So anyway, that's another whole story. But the point is that the ability to manifest and, you know, to concretize something like this, and the power of corporations in the Earth period over Jupiter rules over nation states. So the power of corporations over nation states began to be very, very evident at the beginning of the Earth period. Now,
right. So really, that's the beginning of globalism.
It really is. And the globalism, I date back to the beginning of the 20th century. Rockefeller, Rothschild, Cecil Rhodes was definitely a globalist. He died in 1903, but he set up the Rhodes Scholars. It's definitely a whole globalist scheme there. And all these terms, you know, it sounds, so many of them sound so innocuous, you know, like, well, what's wrong with globalism? Well, you have to look further into it to see, well, when one group wants to maintain control over another group, well, what else is new? What else is new in humankind? But in this case, we see the beginning of, and I trace this in my articles and to some extent in the book, but although I've learned more since that book was published, I definitely have a different view of the European Union, that European Union is definitely globalist. Why? Because you're having bureaucrats make laws and legislate and decide so many things for a nation, and the nation's citizens are not involved.
Right.
They agree to some other power that is outside of that nation.
Well, it's fascism, right? I mean,
it's not, yes, in the end, but it doesn't, at the beginning, it doesn't quite look like that yet. It looks like it's going to be a very nice cooperative effort. And of course, it's I think their first name was the European Coal and Steel Community or something like that. Because the idea was, well, we're not going to have any more wars that, you know, completely ruin the European continent. So we're going to get together and at least forge economic bonds. So that was the idea. But you have a lot of these things taking root at the beginning of the 20th century and deciding a lot of things. In fact, a lot of historians who looked into this see that a lot of the major wars were fought because there are certain bankers. See, bankers are very strong. Industrialists, corporations, corporate conglomerates are very, very strong in the Earth period, unbelievably strong. And you have the whole consumer culture and the rise of public relations and advertising. So somebody, you know, Rockefeller had a very bad name. And then he got a PR person and photographed himself, had himself videoed, or not video, filmed in those days, giving out dimes to people, right? And that
beginning of social media, right?
Right. Well, and that is the beginning of PR in a big way, and so that endeared him to people. So similarly, Bill Gates in our time, who has an enormous monopoly on our global health situation, worth over $100 billion, more than many nations combined. So, you know, he's an example of a globalist in our times who is basically at this moment, you know, threatening to call the shots over nations. I mean, basically, I mean, that's just what's happening right now. So this is why I kind of wanted to, and I know you wanted to start it with.
Yeah, I wanted to talk with you about this because, you know, I had an interview with Laura Eisenhower last month. And, you know, she's the great granddaughter of Dwight D. Eisenhower, and she's a Western astrologer. And she's been really vocal about this and has really stirred the pot, you know, and got people listening to her because she's like, look, you know, this time we're in, you know, my great grandfather predicted, he said, you know, the rise of the industrial, you know, military complex is the reason really that's, you know, fueling all of this. And of course his, you know, a disclosed meeting with ETs that happened in 1954 and the result of that and how, you know, that secret pact they made has given us all this technology that we've gotten, you know, over the last 100 years. I mean, look at the advances that we've made since 1954, you know.
Right. No, amazing. And that speech that her grandfather, is she an astrologer, by the way, you said?
She is. She's a Western astrologer.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You know what? She's really open to Vedic. I mean, she, you know, I read her chart and I've explained things to her. And I mean, really, when you get out to these larger cycles, both systems are saying the same thing. Outer planets, you know, a lot of times they're in the same sign because it takes them so long, you know, to travel. So, although
I would say Western astrologers are saying now we're starting the air period. Well, sidereally, no.
Not quite. That's more I think Western kind of gives a foreshadowing.
No, they're not incompatible, but sometimes it's a different message. For instance, Ray Merriman is saying, well, this is the time now. Now we enter the air period. You know, it's zero, just over the wire. It's zero Aquarius, and now we're moving into a socialism period. So forth. I don't say that. That's not what I'm seeing. But, but to get back, to get back to my theme, and it was daring when I first put it out there because I wasn't sure. But the more that I watched the trends, the more that I thought that this 2020, because it has to be pivotal. It's the fulcrum point of this cycle, and we know that presidents, particularly the U.S. Election cycle goes together with this quite well. Presidents who are elected and inaugurated close, especially on either side of a conjunction, usually are elevated, whether they deserve it or not. They usually are elevated. They become fairly important historically. So we know that with Kennedy, Reagan, Bush for other reasons. So 2020 emerges for that reason as well.
Okay.
But not, to keep it, of course, the U.S., it ends up, because maybe our ascendant chart is at the galactic center, ends up being the focal point for so much of what happens in the world. So how's the direction we go? I mean, look, the United States takes a certain policy and then everybody, well, the WHO, actually, the World Health Organization, did direct the world to essentially take extreme urgent measures to conquer this virus. But what I wanted to keep getting at here is that because even more so since we entered what I call the core of the Earth period. In other words, we're no longer in transition, no longer having fire. Well, we did have one anomaly. And at the time, many of us said, I remember the conjunction was coming up right at the end of in Kritika, the end of Aries, 2852. We said, well, what wars? How could there be, you know, it's a war kind of symbol there with a golden armor for Kritika. Well, the Berlin Wall is down. There's so many things have been solved. What more could there be? What more now? That you know, what could that be? And then, of course, we proceed right into 9/11 and the Middle East and all of this that we've had ever since.
Aries, right?
And as we've learned, certain corporations making a huge amount off of that. And nothing really different from what happened in World War I, where if you study more and more, you realize that a lot of what the shots were called by central bankers and industrialists were calling the shots as what was going to happen between nations. So with that,
Do you think?
Go ahead.
Do you think we should go over the other elements before we continue on, like the rest of the year, just to give people an idea?
Just take it back a second to the Earth, because sure. I just wanted to mention that you'll notice now when we go back to the others, you'll notice that I have assigned, okay, this is me assigning what is a standout conjunction. Usually the beginning and the end are pretty standout for obvious reasons. Then you have, and also 61 is outstanding because it's also Vargottama. Now a Vedic astrologer will know what that is, that it, for others, a planet repeats in the same sign in the Navamsha and other harmonic Varga charts. Right. So it becomes stronger for that reason. So in Capricorn Vargottama, so that's like double Capricorn. In the one in 80-81, these were triple conjunctions that occurred over a period of exact, I think it was late December 1980 into March and July. I think the last one was July of 81, so about over 7 months. So there were 3 of those, so that gives a special power to that one. And then anything that is any conjunction that's at the solstice, the equinox, or the galactic center, that also has incredible power. And the one we have coming in 2020, I think it's like 7.5 hours after the winter solstice. Okay, so those are the conditions that I've laid out where you have to have something, one of those standout conjunctions at the core. Now, this was my thesis, right? My thesis was, which I don't know of anybody else doing, but I thought, I see a major change coming here. Why? How can I justify this astrologically? What, and how could we prove that that's true by looking at other core periods, right? That was my thesis, hypothesis. And so what I found was for the other periods, and we go back to some of those other ones.
Okay, yeah.
They didn't, you see, so this one has a standout conjunction at the core. Notice this one has some standout conjunctions. This is the core of the fire period, which runs between 1782 and 1901. When the nation state, you know, some of the strongest nations in the world were born, US, France, many others, born during the fire period or the fire to earth mutation period from 1901 to 61. And if they're born after that, less strong.
But let's not forget what happened at around the Aries time was when electricity was invented.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that could be said about each of these. And you have, of course, 1821 in a certain way. This is also associated with the beginning of the industrial age. It also coincides with the Western, André Barbeau said that the Industrial Revolution began with the Uranus-Neptune conjunction. That was also 1821, I believe. So you have various things like that. In Aries, in Persian astrology, they say also that the first conjunction in Aries has a great deal of importance. So there was an expansionary, you could imagine, fire is very expansive. So US expands, all, you know, freedom, all these liberty, all these philosophical principles. So even though you could say, well, I thought Jupiter lost the Graha Yuddha. Well, it does. But in my research, I found that it does much better when it is in fire or water, for obvious reason, right? See, it's because it's exalted in Cancer.
Yes, ma'am. It
owns Pisces, and it also owns Sagittarius.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's very strong there. So it's less beleaguered, you might say, by Saturn. They seem to work, and they're actually neutral to each other in the planetary scheme of things, right? Jupiter and Saturn. So it's just the war that makes, there are certain situations. In the Earth period, of course, Jupiter is debilitated in Earth, so there we have that. So notice there is no at the fulcrum point, and I don't know if you can put a pointer, or can
Yeah,
I put a
actually,
pointer? Oh, I can put a pointer.
I can do it. Actually,
okay.
I learned how to do this from.
Okay, I'm putting one on, but I don't know if you can see it.
From here. There.
Good, yeah. So that's the fulcrum point, maybe.
Yes.
You know, needless to say, but all right. So that's the point, and I think, yeah, we don't need to do that on the other ones, but it's pretty clear that that's the one. And notice that it has no asterisk there, neither 1, 2, or 3. There's nothing that makes it a standout conjunction.
Right.
It's obviously important because it's a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, but what I found, so it made my thesis correct, I thought, was that the same kind of expansionary policies that were preceding, or themes that preceded it, continued. They continued with really very little interruption. And there's some stories around that, how it almost didn't, like in US history, there was somebody who became president because the president died soon after inauguration. So his vice president took over, and he wasn't as strongly dedicated to expansionary policies as was the president who died. But in the end, the next president who was elected basically expanded the US, doubled, tripled the size, and so forth. So all this was happening in the, all the early decades of the 19th century. Okay, so let's have a look at the water period. Okay. And you see also there's no special deal at the middle.
Right.
Because it's not fulfilling the requirements.
Yeah, it's not a triple conjunction. What was the year of the Black Plague? Do you know?
Yeah, I have all those things in my, all the different plagues. What I did notice was that most of the plagues occurred in the Scorpio. I
was just going to say,
within the 20 years.
Right mm-hmm.
Yeah, within the 20 years of starting with the Scorpio conjunction seemed to be the worst for the plagues. I did notice that, and that fits, doesn't it?
It sure does.
Natural eighth house.
And, and that's something that we've been talking about, is that, I know that, there's all these theories about the virus and where it came from and what the intention is, blah, blah, blah. But I can't see that every single pandemic was planned bioterrorism, And so when you see that if they are coming up in a Scorpio period, then that tells you that this is, a pattern of nature that the humans are following as well, having.
Right. But this one, you see, because Capricorn is involved, then you do have much more the possibility of a man-made virus. And in fact, we know that a lot of that is going on.
Right. And a lot of it is, this is how they do research on viruses, though. They create a virus as a possible, vaccine for another virus, and they end up creating another problem, And so a lot of times, like our scientists, all you have to do is look it up on the NIH website. My best friend works for FEMA, and she went on there and pulled up all this stuff. We hired the scientists in China to create this as a possible vaccine for SARS-1. And then they were supposed to send it to us, and we were supposed to they made the codes for it, and then we were supposed to create the vaccine. And then somewhere it got leaked. Now, who leaked it? That's where the conspiracy is. There's no conspiracy about whether it was created or not. Of course it was. That's how they.
It was, vaccines, top virologists, top virologists are saying, look, the whatever they call the sequencing of the virus, there's no way that this is just natural.
Oh, no, it's not. And it's all documented on NIH. All you have to do is look at the patent for SARS.
No, and they put it what they call the spike protein.
Right.
Makes it more dangerous.
The conspiracy is who leaked it and why, and was it, a nefarious government thing, or was it maybe there was some crazy mad scientist you know, working behind the scenes who leaked it? You know, that's the part that we don't know.
Right. So I think we can come back to the 2020 chart. So you know, basically, I'll make one more point about that last one. And that is that you have, in water period, you have religion and monarchies, royalties, very strong. So obviously the conquering of new lands, America, so many places were conquered usually for God and queen, you know, or king. The only way that Columbus got to the Americas was through funding of Queen Isabella. And so it was for Christendom and for the queen. So that's why this period, and also the greatest discoveries were through navigation, through travel by water. So that's what we had in this period.
Okay.
And so the greatest wealth came from if you had the greatest naval superiority.
So that's what it is. It's all about the Navy at that time.
Yeah.
Yep. Because they didn't have the firepower, you know.
Not yet. And the greatest, in fact, I do the longer study of that, is the gunpowder was invented in it was the 9th century, in the last fire period. And then there was no significant discovery in weaponry until you have Alfred Nobel invented the what's the word? The explosive device that what's the thing that blows up things?
Detonator?
Anyway. No, it's like a bomb anyway. That what you explode when you want to bulldoze through, you need to explode something so you make room for a bridge. The word's escaping me at the moment.
An explosion. I know
anyway,
exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Sorry, and I don't have all those notes in front of me, but I've written about it. And of course, ironically, he gave out the Nobel Peace Prize. But his so that was the last major. So it was a major explosive device, which was very dangerous to work with. People hadn't worked with it because it was so dangerous to work with, obviously. But this was the first first major weaponry that had been invented since the last fire period, you see. So then when we had our earth to fire transition period, then that was with the triple conjunctions in fire. That's when we had the atom bomb, you see. Right. So anyway, we might want to get on to something more.
Let's see if we can find
the Mars Ketu.
I just wanted to show them. So we saw fire, earth. Where is the air?
Okay.
I didn't get the air.
Oh, the air. Yeah, no, I didn't. Can we get the blue thing out of there? That's kind of now taking over all of these.
Oh yeah. Let me just tell you what I'll do. I'll stop the share and then reshare it again to make sure that it's okay.
Yeah, good.
So
so this is the larger scheme.
Right. So air is in the future.
The
reason why you have to create that is
there were just so many.
Sure.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
No, I was to say the reason, what you were saying before is that in Western astrology, they're moving into the air dominant period because Saturn next year will be going into Aquarius.
Right. So their Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions at 0 Aquarius.
Right. But this is what's coming up in sidereal is the air dominant starts 2199. That's quite a
right. Now you've got a long transition. Now there is an air conjunction, I believe, in 21.
And how do you see
2120?
What's coming up for our future progeny? What is this air dominant and then the transition from earth to air?
Well, the first thing is the first major thing, I think, before we leap to that, is successfully navigating through the next 60 years of the Earth period. Because without some kind of reversal, and I have predicted a reversal of the globalist trends. Now, what does that mean? It means the almost total domination of corporate concerns over, well, Jupiter is a lot of things, you know, it's ethics, it's, you know, we've seen a lot of Jupiterian areas of life go downhill. Some of them are journalism, for sure. I would say mainstream journalism, mainstream media, journalism, the law, education, become very, very much corporate. You notice the, I don't know where to start. I mean,
well, Jupiter, religions. Look what's
religions,
happening in the
yes,
Catholic
yes.
You know?
And so what are we saying? We're not saying that religion is suddenly worthless. We're saying that there are individuals and organizations who have allowed concerns of, you could just say greed, we could also say material security, concerns for more money to dominate over really what the church should be doing, which is guiding people in their spiritual life, giving them a stronger ethical, religious foundation for their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, you know, dictating this and that and the other policy, which and saying, which they did way back, what was the, Martin Luther was very much against, saying, well, you need to go to a priest in order to, and pay him a certain amount of money in order to make sure you didn't go to hell. Well, what's different about some of these mega churches also saying, well, give a lot of money to us and you'll be a good person, whatever they say to convince people to give a lot of funds.
Right.
So you have all of those things. So you have, and you have all this pedophilia involved with the church and many other organizations. So the decline in these areas. So this is what I see as major kind of revelations coming out there at this fulcrum point in order to clean up, resurrect this Earth period, so that, quite frankly, so that we survive it. I think it's quite a big battle that's going on now, and that will be coming to some kind of conclusive head by the end of 2020. Of course, coincides with the U.S. election, presidential election year, and into 2021, because of the power of this fulcrum, you know, this conjunction at the fulcrum, and the amazing momentum of the globalists and their desire to, or their intent, their plans, which are well underway. Believe me, they've been well underway. And if you look at just U.S. presidents, they've been basically globalist policies continued from the early 90s. Early 90s.
1954. I mean, really, you know, talk about a fulcrum. That was the fulcrum of him saying, hey, you know what, to these ET groups, you don't have sovereignty over this planet. We do. But when he left, you know,
well, you talking about Eisenhower? You talking about Eisenhower?
Yes. And
well, now he gave that speech. Yeah, he gave that speech, and I have that. I always give that, just even the paragraph of it, because it's so pivotal. You're right. And he gave that speech, I think exactly a month before. So it was just as he was leaving office. Yeah. Maybe it's the 19th of January, 1961. So literally a month before that conjunction, which was February 18th, 1961.
Right. But what's happened since then is that the reins, you know, apparently somebody's making power dealings behind our back, you know, with these ET groups to get this technology, but we're also giving over our sovereignty to them. And that's what these globalists want. They want to have the power, and so they're giving some of it away to these ET groups that are now infiltrating all of our systems of meeting on the planet.
Right. Yeah, I'm not knowledgeable about the ET groups. I have heard people say that that's pivotal.
Well, all you have to look at it as just a little note. Paul Hellyer, he's the former Defense Minister of Canada, and he's actually written a book about this. He's given several talks. He's gone and talked to the U.S. Congress about this when they have a huge meeting. I think it was, well, it was right before 2001, 9/11 happened. And they had just had this big congressional meeting with all of these military guys coming in, giving testimonies, and all of that was forgotten because of 9/11. And so if you just look up Paul Hellyer, there's lots of military evidence.
Right. I wouldn't be surprised.
About the groups that are, you know, the reptilians and the Zeta Reticuli that have come here. And anyway, it's all out there.
Well, it's pretty clear that the military or the CIA, whatever, has been involved in some of our major social media, that they've, you know, funded them, got them going. And, you know, if you were to think about it, you know, like Zuckerberg, many of these guys are kind of like, I don't know if they really invented it or they were given the opportunity to carry through on something that the CIA or, you know, some military intelligence groups were already working on. But they needed maybe they needed a front group to make it legitimate, all that kind of thing. So it doesn't surprise me in that way. And that we suddenly had this explosion of technology, but the fact that we would have information technology coming in a blaze right around the time of the triple conjunctions in Virgo, well, there it is. It's all.
There it is.
Yeah. I give
can't make this stuff up, you guys.
Oh, you can't. So what we're, you know, looking at now, I would just maybe, to bring us a little more up to the present, maybe show our
you want to
Mars,
show the
the Mars K2
yes.
conjunction, just as an example of, and maybe move into some of those, the Earth Summit, UN in a little.
Well, shoot. Let me find
That's all right.
it.
We can talk about it.
Okay.
We can talk about it.
You go ahead and talk.
Yeah.
I'm going to find it on my computer.
Yeah. The reason that I say that, now, there's several things. So we're in Corona time, as I say. And part of the reason that I see so much, I call it in a way, and I didn't invent this expression, but I think it's really apt, a medical 9/11 and media epidemic. Not that we don't have a real virus, but according to all the information and statistics I've seen, it is no worse than a typical flu season. So why has it resulted in the world's lockdown?
Well, that's only if they're really skewing the numbers, which I know I've heard that they've inflated them. I've also heard that they're actually not reporting the real amount, just like China didn't report the real amount.
Right.
So like here in Indiana, typical our flu season last year, which ended like March, whatever, 65 people died. And presently with coronavirus, we have approaching 1,200 deaths. So that's a big difference, 65 to 1,200.
Yeah, I'm not saying nothing is happening. I'm just saying because of the parallel to 9/11. Now the parallel is this, that you have, and of course, you just had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Of course, it was not as close. It was a year and a half earlier, more than that. Getting to that. Should I keep?
Yeah, no, go ahead. I was looking for the chart.
Right.
This is 92. I don't know.
There were two. Yeah, there were two together. Yeah.
I can pull it up though. So the date that you're looking for is
it's the Mars. It's the Mars K2
and that
conjunction,
was February
24th.
This year.
February 24th of 2020, which is
I remember that day. That day I was so sick, and I'm pretty sure that I had the coronavirus. I was out in California at an expo, and I got sick on the plane home, and I was sick for 3 weeks. I mean, it was really, really bad. And at the time I thought, oh, this is just the flu, like a really bad flu, right?
Yeah.
But it was not. Oh, no, ma'am. I'm certain that I had it. I gave it to my husband, and he got really sick, and then my daughter never got it.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
there we
young
go.
people apparently less, yeah. So it's, yeah, you don't have the exact time. Let's see.
So I can do that. I can do that. So
Yeah,
let's
I've got
go
that
by
chart
minute.
around here.
And let's
It's
see.
Washington,
March
D.C. It's 1:02 a.m.
by hour.
1:02 a.m.
Okay.
So 7:29 Scorpio rising.
102. Mars K2 conjunction?
Yeah, you should have a February 24th.
Oh, you know what? Jeez Louise. Oh, no, this is right. Yeah, February 25th.
No, 24th.
24th. Okay, there we
At
go.
1:02,
Okay,
1:02 a.m.
Okay. Okay. So let's go by hour. Forward. Well, shoot, this is not lining up. February 24th.
You have Lahiri Ainamsha?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's very, very close. Your program is not. Yeah, I have Sri Jyoti Star, which gives a 729 ascendant. Your conjunction.
So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put K2 in Mars exactly.
Yeah, you may also be using True Node. I'm using Me Node.
Oh yeah, I'm using True. Yeah, that's what it is.
So I come to 11:13 Sag.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I think that's why I have it as the next day.
Yeah,
that's why.
Yeah.
Okay, there it is. Okay, so minute. Mars. Yeah, so and you know what? I think both true and mean are totally valid. It's just when I'm pulling up charts, I like to use true.
Yeah. And they're usually within a degree of each other.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, it's important that
go.
it be a Scorpio ascendant.
Yes. Okay. Well, this is here in Bloomington, so. And you wanted to make it for DC?
Washington, D.C.
Okay. Okay. Let's do that. Okay. So let's go. Because I think this is important for people to see. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, it changed it, but the ascendant isn't. Okay. The ascendant has Rahu. This has the next day. Yeah.
No, it's got to be a Scorpio ascendant anyway.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, anyway.
Yeah.
Let's just talk. So if you were using the true node,
so using the Scorpio,
Right.
Anyway, my point is that it comes across the financial axis. So the chief effect, and I'm not saying that there was nobody who died or the people weren't affected, or you and your husband obviously fell sick. Many other people did. So I don't mean to minimize that. But the major effect, because we have flu seasons every single year. And so this particular flu, so people have to kind of move their eyes over. I don't know if they can see when I can.
Yeah, so here's the Scorpio house. So
yeah.
if this
Okay, so I'm going to put my marker there. Can they see that where my marker is? Yeah, okay. So visualize the, which is great about the South Indian chart. You can just visualize, okay, this ascendant is there. It's 729 Scorpio. So you have the Mars K2 with Jupiter later on in the sign. And you have the Mars K2 conjunction across a major information axis. And Mars K2 creates an explosion of energy. And you have it in Mula Nakshatra, which in any case is can be inflammatory and destructive, but in the end has a lot of healing powers. Nriti has the deity involved, has a lot of healing powers. But really the major effect we see now, we're what, May 3rd now, so we're just coming out of the worst of the virus, hopefully, in the US and other countries. But since this is a chart for the US, we're basically saying, look, this is a chart done for when Mars conjuncts Ketu, which is when, this is before a national emergency was declared. It was about a month after the first case was diagnosed. There's probably other cases around. right? Because they'd essentially, the cases began in China unreported by mid-November. So it was already going several months in China. All the flights still coming over to the US.
Oh, yeah.
All through that period. And so you have this event, by the way, on the 24th, you have 21st and 24th of February, largest point drop in the Dow Jones average in history.
Mm-hmm.
So you had extreme volatility there. So that's already showing the financial side of it. You had Pluto entering sidereal Capricorn later the same day, after, what was it, 292 years. I may have that number slightly wrong, don't have the, but since about 1792. So you had major resets financially, seemingly catastrophic. I mean, we've got huge unemployment, all kinds of major economic issues threatening to get much worse if the country doesn't open up. So I think this chart reveals a lot about, you could say, well, didn't begin on that day. No, but this is the chart that shows in part, large part, okay, where is this explosion hitting? It's hitting in the financial area primarily. And it's also affecting the media because it's, or the media is affecting it, what I call a media epidemic. The media has really made this probably worse through all kinds of fear and panic that's been engendered.
Right.
So,
well, and guess what else happened that day? And look right here. Pluto just entered Capricorn.
Yeah, no, that's what I just said. That's what I just said.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, as soon as that happened and then this happened.
Yeah.
And for me, I mean, this happened in my 6th house, but Mula is the gut. I mean, it's the root, right? And what is the root of our body? It's our gut, it's our colon. And so what they discovered is that this virus, especially what I discovered on this day, is that this virus, if it makes past your lungs, it goes down to your gut, and that's where the real problem is. And this is what people aren't talking about, because in China, people eat much better than we do. They eat a lot more fermented foods. They feed their microbiome in their gut. So this virus didn't express itself that way. But when it came over here, we don't eat well. And so our microbiome is not flourishing. And so that virus, if it makes past your lungs, it goes down to your gut. And that's where the real problems start.
Right. Well, I would also, I'll just name a few facts here. Because it's just extensive, all the misinformation, disinformation in my latest article, which is at my website, called Coronavirus. What's the next part of it is Coronavirus.
I'll put the link down in the comments because I listened to it last night. I put it on the text.
The bigger picture, about coronavirus, the bigger picture and timelines. And I've got pretty extensive timeline. And one of the things, of course, the WHO came out on March 12th. And this series of timelines illustrates all the contradictions and who said what. And then they later said, no, I didn't say it. And just in terms of the statistics that pushed the policies into place were these doctors, most of whom were funded by Bill and Melinda Gates. In fact, the two major sources of policy decisions were the IHME in the US, informing Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci, funded primarily by Bill Gates and Foundation, and the WHO, majorly funded by Bill Gates Foundation. They both came out and said, this is, a huge danger, urgent. You are derelict if you don't take major, nations of the world, if you don't take major action at this time. And also the Imperial College came out in London, came out on March 16th and said 2.5 million people in the United States are going to die from this, even if you take all kinds of measures. And what did they say? 500,000 people in Britain. Well, of course, people were terrified by that. Well, it wasn't even 10 days later, they were already reducing that by huge portions. So they turned out to be wildly wrong. And so there's, so there's your Mars Ketu in a way right there.
Yeah.
Also, here's some, the statistics, and I've been following some people who are, very, very skilled at reading these maps and these graphs, and they see where errors have been made, where they've been tampered with, you might say. And we know already, look, Dr. Birx, I saw her myself on one of the daily briefings given at the White House, saying, well, in answer to a journalist, well, we're quite liberal in this country about reporting deaths. If they're instructed, if it looks like COVID-19, if it's possible or probable, we tell them to write down COVID-19. What she didn't say was, of course, hospitals receive more funding per death, and also per ventilator use, which of course ruins the lungs. Well, I didn't know that before I found out. But here's some interesting statistics which don't make any sense. And this is more Mars Ketu explosive and manipulative effects of disinformation. Why is it that India, with a population of 1.36 billion, has fewer cases and fewer dead than Long Island, New York? Why is it that Myanmar, which is Burma, with a 54 million population, has slightly fewer cases than Alaska, with 650,000 population? And Myanmar, I think, borders on China. Okay, how is it that there are more dead in Iceland than in Hong Kong, where 4 people are dead? How is it there are more dead in Mauritius, this tiny little island in the Pacific, right, than in Shanghai? How is it that there are no people dead in Mongolia, which is a part of China, or Laos, or Cambodia, or Vietnam, all adjacent or very near China? And of course, the example I give in my article is Taiwan, which was supposed to be, according to Johns Hopkins University, was supposed to be the hardest hit. And because they have a lot of travel back and forth with China. I didn't know that. 400,000 people. They have 24 million population. They've had 6 dead and about 430 cases.
Right. Well,
so,
like
nothing
anything,
makes
it's
sense.
A mix, right? I mean, they're definitely not reporting it correctly, but also their health is so much better than ours.
Yeah, but I don't think you can explain it that way. I know we have, for instance, a lot of obesity. I heard a doctor say that because that's going to bring heart problems. It's going to bring definitely problems with the immune system. But I heard one doctor say that, and that's why they had such problems in Louisiana, because they have a large.
Well, they had Mardi Gras too. I mean, that was the big spread of it down there.
Right, that could have been it in part, but they also have a large amount of obesity. So that's a health problem in the U.S. We have a bad health
our
statistics.
microbiome is horrible.
It's showing up. For sure, it's showing up. And there's so many things to be said about this. I'm just making, in this short amount of time, I'm saying that there are too many pieces of misinformation and disinformation. What is disinformation? It's information that you purposely put out there to obfuscate what's going on.
Right.
And so the parallel to 2001 is, of course, and I make this point at the beginning of my last article, is you had so many scientists and engineers who said, hey, those World Trade Centers buildings, they could not have possibly fallen down like that. They could not have come down without a planned demolition.
And look what was happening that day as well. Not only did we have a Kalasarpa yoga, but we have Mercury retrograde sitting over here with Neptune, with the sun.
Right.
Authorities lying, and we're finding out, about the lies, or the lies were coming out at that time, Well,
it's starting to come out, and yet people are, it's like, okay, so it turns out that all of these, even I quote Dr. Fauci in my article, and here we are leaning on, or President Trump and the other leaders are leaning on these mathematical models, and it turns out they're wildly wrong. Well, now it's time to listen to some other I hate to say experts, but people who with knowledge of, when you shut down a society, which is the first time in history that you've basically shut down most of the globe,
Yeah.
And you see that these countries that didn't shut down, and here's another, they've done better, obviously economically, and also they've done just as well health-wise, if not better.
Right.
So here's another part of the disinformation that, and I know some people I talk to, they say, oh, herd immunity, that doesn't, well, herd immunity is what we've done for millennia, right? Herd immunity is when you actually go out and get exposed and you take on the antibodies or whatever, and you develop immunity to these things. And this has gone on for as long as mankind has existed. Now, there are people that are more vulnerable. Obviously, the American Indians, Native Americans were decimated by new people coming over. But the same principle, if you've been locked away in your home and you're unable to go out, and so you haven't developed immunity to this virus, there's probably going to be a new wave because people haven't been developing any immunity to it.
Right. Well, and what I'm writing here is what's opposite all of this Aquarian stuff going on with Neptune and is Leo. And so it's just like with, how the oppositions work with Rahu and Ketu, they reflect, the nakshatras reflect each other. If you want to find out the secret, look to the opposite nakshatra. There's no planets there, but it's the leaders. It's all of these people that think they're royalty, these globalists that think that they're going to lie to us and trick us.
Right. Well, the other thing is, you see, and I have gone into this in the last couple of articles, is that they lost a lot of power. Some say decades of their planning in 2016 when Britain or the UK voted for Brexit and when the US elected Donald Trump.
Bingo.
See, and so from that, and that's instructional astrologically, because why? 6 to 7 years, now that was 4 years before, but let's face it, I mean, the plans for Trump's candidacy had to begin in 2015. All these things were starting to build. So 6, 7 years, 6 because it's half of a Jupiter cycle, 7 years is a quarter of a Saturn cycle. As much as 6 to 7 years before the conjunction, you start to be able to see signs of what's coming with that conjunction.
Right.
So that was very clear with World War I, where and I won't go into that here, but I do go into that in my tipping point article, which is at my website, Jupiter Saturn 2020 tipping point. And so the point is that they got pushed back with those. And notice over those 4 years, if you've been following UK politics, I mean, the BBC, all the globalists in power, and they're usually in charge of the mainstream media. The BBC did not want Brexit. The people voted for it, but never mind. The BBC kept lobbying, so many people kept lobbying for it not to work, essentially.
Right.
Small wonder that Theresa May didn't succeed. Well, she wasn't for it in the first place, So anyway, she had to kind of go and do what the people had said they wanted. So in any case, you had these two things which were nationalist. They were basically anti-globalist events.
Right.
Brexit and the election of Donald Trump, where people said, no, we don't want, because the acceleration of globalist plans had happened under Obama. Every single globalist project in the world was coming out with Obama. So Trump comes along and he doesn't sign some of these things, or he takes them apart. So my point is that in the process of approaching 2020, they see all these things being dismantled, and they're in fear that he will get reelected. And so how do you get rid of him, having tried the last 3 years? They're at 3.5 years to get rid of him.
I agree. I've been saying the whole time, Edith, I've been saying, you know what? They couldn't get rid of him with, the phony Russian collusion.
Yeah, the Russian.
Couldn't get rid of him.
Yeah. This is
with,
number 3.
The impeachment. And so this is their last ditch effort to get him out.
That's
but you know what? I think he's going to win.
Yeah, no, I do too. And, whatever your viewers' opinions are of Donald Trump, the way to see this in the larger picture, which should make you feel better, hopefully, is that being an anti-globalist at this point in time is going to be better, I believe, for most people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing is that the media has done an amazing job to convince at least half of the American public that they've got the worst president that ever existed, right? And they have and so it made it totally ethical to just try to get rid of him, or talk about assassinating him, or anything. It just made it totally fine. Anything you want to do that's illegal, that's fine. So they've done a lot of illegal things, which are coming out now, to basically get rid of him. A lot of treasonous, traitorous things have been done. And I've been writing about this for several years. 3 years ago, February 2017, I wrote an article called Deep State versus Head of State. And it's no secret, but now it's all coming out. So to some people, it's big news. They tried to basically unseat him. It was a coup. It was a coup. Yep. And so now you have desperation.
Yep.
You have desperation. So that's the way, and the whole world isn't, electing Donald Trump or whoever shows up on the other side. I don't know if it's going to be Biden, but
well, they said it's going to be Biden. Yeah.
Yeah.
We just don't know we don't know who the vice president nominee is going to be, but he did say it's going to be a woman. So,
right.
And what Joni was saying was that, the charts are showing some back and forth going on where it may end up that, Biden wins, but then they go back and they do a recount and it ends up that actually Trump won. And that's what's going to cause.
Well, you can see all this manipulation happening now. Where we've got to do mail-in vote. Well, there's umpteen ways to tamper with that. Right. So, in other words, as we move forward to this point, and if your viewers can keep visualizing this chart of, okay, we've been barreling towards, with the globalists have been barreling towards, they had so many things planned that would be in place by 2020. A whole globalist agenda. That's why I talk about Agenda 21 and the UN and all these plans. The US would be, they just have to disempower, they have to weaken the United States.
Right.
And that's why on my timeline, I purposely included Trump's speech to the United Nations, September 24th of 2019, because he talks about the global, no, not globalists. He talks about, we're excited about our plan for a national renewal. And he basically says, I don't have it right in front of me, but that the future does not belong to the globalists. Of course, the UN, they hate to hear that,
right? Because
they are the globalists.
That's right.
So maybe, I don't know if we have another few minutes to just discuss the UN chart, or should we?
Sure. Yeah, I think, is that the one that I had? Let's see. Let me see.
We've probably gone on. What about? I lost track of when we began.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the UN chart. Let's just go over this, and then this will be the end of it.
Yeah. Okay. So back to the Graha Yuddha thing. You see that Mars and Saturn. Boy, in the midst of describing everything, I'm not sure I said the basic premise, which is one of the basic premises is that the planets must be within 1 degree of each other, in the same sign or adjacent signs. Astrologers know that, but just for your
So just for all you people that don't know what Graha Yuddha Planetary War is, it's when two planets occupy the same sign, same degree, and they're competing for that spot.
Right. And they can be in adjacent signs, actually.
Okay.
So 29 of one and 0 of another. So what you notice here is that Mars and Saturn are not only in Graha Yuddha, but they're very powerful. Because it's also Vargotama, and also Saturn is near, let's see, I made this point, Saturn is near its stationary retrograde point within 3 minutes. Wait a minute. Let's see, we've got 2 charts here. That's the Earth Summit chart. Okay. No, that's not. Okay, sorry, had the wrong chart there. Anyway, very, very powerful Saturn. They've been in Saturn Dasha. They were in Saturn Dasha at the time of the Earth Summit. They were in Saturn, Venus. Saturn, Venus, Saturn. The United Nations was born October 24th, 1945, in the Mars-Saturn dasha. So it was born, began with the Graha Yuddha, which didn't bode well. Because especially for, now it's a strong chart, but my main, many things to be said about this, but Mars rules both the second house and the ninth house. Ninth house is the house of laws. And the United Nations is making so many laws and resolutions that they intend for the world to follow. And the reason why nationalists should have some hope in this is because Mars loses the planetary war.
Right.
So, but as I've discovered in my research on this, even when it loses, Mars causes quite a bit of havoc. And notice also Mars is debilitated in Cancer. Now it gets Nichabanga Raja Yoga. It's true, it gets technically corrected through Saturn.
Right, and their moon is exalted in Taurus. So
right. All of that is true. But
Jupiter, Venus.
I was right. There is both with the Earth Summit chart, which we can't get to today, but it is in my latest article. Saturn is at it very close, about 8 minutes from its stationary retrograde point. So it is very powerful. And so we see with these two key UN charts that I use, there's a major bureaucratic power, the ability to organize, the ability to spread its tentacles around the globe, the number of UN organizations.
Here, they're having a nodal return.
Yeah, yep, there's all of that.
You know?
And so a major point that I make about this chart is that for an organization that the globalists essentially, I learned this over time, I certainly didn't know it for many years, essentially the globalists are using the United Nations and its entities, including the WHO, as a front organization. So many powerful corporations fund the UN. Of course, nation states do as well. But they're major corporate funders behind Agenda 21, 2030.
And that's why Trump stopped giving them money after he discovered the manipulations that they're doing.
Absolutely. And
the
WHO, he's been cutting off funding for these many situations where, thank goodness, but of course gets accused of stopping good relations and anything you can accuse him of course.
That's right.
But the point is that people should take a heart with the fact that this Mars loses the Graha Yuddha for this chart, because even though it'll fight to the tooth, to the death, whatever, they cannot make their laws legally binding. And that's why, like Eleanor Roosevelt with her, the Declaration of Human Rights, it's not legally binding. So even though they have their International Criminal Court, I think that's part of the UN as well. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but there's basically great ideas there. I mean, it's so idealistic, but look who donated the land for the United Nations in New York. It's the Rockefellers. Rockefeller's a major globalist player, along with Rothschild and along with Rhodes, Cecil Rhodes, who died, of course, well before this, but not before he set up the lifetime Rhodes Scholar Program. So many major players. Bill Clinton's a Rhodes Scholar. I mean, it's very well planned out. Rhodes Scholars are closely connected with the Council on Foreign Relations, another globalist organization that was founded within 5 weeks of the first Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Earth in 1921. So we see all of this now. It's easier to see it because enough time has elapsed to see the power that they've accumulated and that they're trying to basically manifest in 2020.
Right. But it's going to flop. I think it's going to flop.
Yeah, no, I believe so. But not without a big battle.
Yeah, December 20th. That's the day, you guys, of at least
21st. Yeah, it's 21st.
2021, depending on if you follow true or mean node.
Right,
But they're both significant because I really think that the true node begins the event. And the mean node really kind of is the fulcrum in a way, you know, because it's mean. And you really see results on the mean node, but you have to pay attention to the time between the true and the mean. Because that's the progression. And I think they're both important, but I set my software to true. So that's,
you know. No, you have to kind of decide one or the other. And then if you have a larger audience that doesn't mind the nitpicking, then you can present both. But yeah, it's only for convenience to choose one or the other.
Right. Oh my gosh, Edith, I am just so loving our conversation, and I'm so grateful that you've chosen to spend this time with me tonight and explain to everybody what's going on, because, you know, I do these videos, you know, to help people. That's the whole point is, you know, if they take one morsel from this and they learn something, then you've helped someone. And so I really think this is going to give people a lot to think about, and a launching point for them to do their own research. And of course, read her book, because it's amazing. I just, you know, and it really, and it's, you don't have to read it from the beginning to end. You can pick up at really at any chart and read through it, and you're going to understand what's going on.
And they're organized by ascendant sign, which is the thing that Chakapani taught me was so important. And the first part, the first chapter is a lot of review. It's the historical context and collective destiny. So that's the chapter on straight out mundane astrology. Not that there isn't more throughout the book, but that's 56 pages there. Also, they can find more articles. There's now I've got about 740 pages of articles.
See, that's why I love you. You remind me so much of my ethnomusicology professors. I'm like, oh, why somebody does research.
Articles. Yeah, some of them were longer. So yeah, I did a 60-page interview with the founder of Fixed Stars. So that took that. So with the longer articles took longer. Take up more of those pages. So 55 articles are there.
Wow. Well, I look up to you so much, and I have so much to work on. My brain is just filled with ideas. So I just thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
For joining me. And, you know, of course, you'll keep us updated with your articles on your website, and hopefully some videos. I'm going to keep.
Yeah, I tend to more write, but yeah,
I know,
videos now and again.
But you're a great speaker too. So thank you so much. And the website is edithhathaway.com. And again, I'll put the link to the article her most current one that she was talking about in the comments. So yeah. And of course, if you're interested in booking a reading with her, she's available, and you know, I can't recommend her more. So thank you so much, Edith.
All right. Thank you, Katya.
Namaste.
Namaste.